After crossing the unthinkable doorstep of nuclear warfare during the Cuban Missile Crisis, the Cold War transitioned towards the next milestone that crossed worldly lines. Continued tension between the United States and the Soviet Union would intensify rivalry in yet other vast, previously unexplored areas of the world. Rather than exploring an uncharted landscape, it involved the dominance of every nation on the planet in the final new frontier. While it was indeed a race to the moon, it was more so a symbolic battle of technological superiority and an ideological triumph. While beyond the rockets and the landings on the moon, it leaves us to wonder whether it was indeed the pursuit of knowledge in space or another field for superpower play-by-play. As the stars were invited, so were the stakes. Would a new frontier bring people closer to one another or set them further away from each other? In 1957, the Soviet Union shocked the world by launching the first man-made satellite to orbit the Earth, Sputnik. The move not only demonstrated the Soviets' technological superiority, but also gave the USSR leadership in space exploration. The successful launch of Sputnik sent shockwaves around the world, declaring that the Soviet Union had surpassed the United States in one of the most crucial areas of scientific achievement. The USSR did not stop there. In November 1957, they launched Laika, a dog, into space aboard Sputnik 2, which was the first living creature to orbit the Earth. This was followed by an even greater milestone, Yuri Gagarin's historic flight in 1961, where he became the first human to travel into space and orbit the planet. The Soviet Union was celebrating through Gagarin, further cementing national pride and ensuring the USSR was not a lightweight contender in the space race. This forced the United States to reevaluate its strategy in space. America did not have success matching these Soviet firsts and was playing catch-up. The United States accelerated its space exploration pace by rapidly establishing NASA in 1958. The concern of being left behind by the Soviets created a new sense of urgency in American scientific and military communities, beginning an intense and fiercely competitive period in the quest for space supremacy. The space race was now on its way, with the USSR beginning in an excellent and timely way. When the Soviet Union rapidly gained a couple of early successes, the United States responded boldly in trying to recover its lost ground in the space race when it established NASA in 1958. The new agency was set to spearhead America's effort in space exploration, special emphasis being laid on technological advantage to get the U.S. back in the best position for dominating space. Then, in 1961, President John F. Kennedy came to address a joint session of Congress and famously declared that before the end of the decade, an American astronaut would walk on the moon. That bold challenge sparked the imagination of the nation, pushing the government, as well as the private sector, to commit enormous resources toward making the impossible possible. The words of Kennedy served directly as a response to the early successes of the USSR in space, publicizing America's intent not to catch up, but to overtake the USSR in this game. The steps were the missions of Mercury and Gemini. Success in the Mercury program had put America's first men into space, paving the path for more advanced explorations. The Gemini flights that followed will be precursors to the Apollo mission, test critical technologies, perfect orbital maneuvers, and sharpen the skills to land on the moon. The early missions were a stepping stone to the ultimate, Apollo 11. Now the world was geared toward the moonshot countdown, and America was ready to lead the way for the country to show history, do something extraordinary, and alter the world for good. It was a spectacular moment in the history of humans when on July 20th, 1969, Apollo 11, which carried astronauts Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin into space, successfully touched down on the moon. As soon as Armstrong became the first to step on the lunar surface, his words resounded across the Earth. "That's one small step for a man, one giant leap for mankind." These are the words defining the moment during the space race and symbolize the boundless potential of mankind to study the cosmos. Apollo 11 was not only an American affair, but also a victory for all of humanity. People all over the world had seen the movement of Armstrong and Aldrin on the moon by hoisting the flag of the United States and collecting samples of the moon. It was not the supremacy of America alone, but had become one milestone in the history of all mankind. It brought together different cultures and people, for the event led to a mass celebration on Earth with a general sense of victory. The picture of astronauts on the moon ensured it was always the picture of human genius and the number of opportunities in space travel. The Soviet Union, however, never managed to repeat the feat even after the early leads in the space race. USSR's moon program was crumbling under so many failures. Technical troubles, political turmoil, and changed priorities away from manned space exploration. Being the first launch of a satellite and man into space, Yuri Gagarin, the great plans for landing the first man on the moon went up in smoke. The Apollo 11 landing left a huge gap between the Soviets, and it unmistakably proved to the world that America had reached the moon a little earlier. The success of Apollo 11 cemented the US as a leading power in space, while the moon landing became a timeless symbol of exploration, achievements, and the spirit of competition that defined the Cold War. Immediately after the success of Apollo 11, the United States soon changed its focus from lunar landing missions to more practicable and sustainable space ventures. The Space Shuttle program, initiated in 1981, constituted the backbone of American space exploration. Unlike the one-time use Apollo design mission, the Space Shuttle was a reusable spacecraft that could perform repeated missions, deploy satellites, and carry out scientific research in low Earth orbit. Under the shuttle program, Skylab, also launched by the US in 1973, emerged as America's first space station. That served as a forerunner of the ones with the later space stations, such as the ISS. When the US was continuing to advance in reusable spacecraft and the development of space stations, so was the Soviets. The Mir space station, launched in 1986, became the new symbol of Soviet space achievements. It survived for 15 years more than many believed, and Mir was used to improve the human exploration of space. The Soviet space technology greatly advanced. Its programs failed on most economic and political grounds. As the Cold War began to thaw, the intense rivalry between the US and the USSR gradually shifted toward cooperation. The 1990s saw both superpowers working together on joint missions, including the collaboration on the International Space Station, ISS, which remains a symbol of global cooperation. The end of the space race did not mean the end of the quest for exploration and scientific discovery, but rather the beginning of a new era of international partnership in space exploration. The space race did not just bring about tremendous achievements in space, but also breakthroughs in technology that have become part of our daily lives. Results. Most of the innovations spurred by the space effort itself have trickled down to find their applications in civilian use. Things like satellite communication, GPS, computers, and advanced materials. Space explorations themselves often demand dependable systems to use for their work, leading, for example, to innovations not only in telecommunication and medicine, but in medicine itself. It was not just a war between superpowers, for the race to the moon had given way to progress, which rebuilt the modern world. From the rivalry of the Cold War to the cooperation of the world at large, this marked a very significant turning point in space exploration. The intense competition of the 1960s and 1970s matured into cooperative ventures after the fall of the Soviet Union. The International Space Station would be a good example because it has finally become an epitome of this cooperation in which both the US and Russia cooperate with others in creating a space-based platform for scientific discovery. What used to be the battleground of ideological supremacy has now turned out to be a symbol of human unity in pursuit of knowledge. The second question is, would we have been here without the Cold War? That intense competitive pressure fueled this sort of space exploration. Perhaps, was the Cold War so important that it drove innovation at a pace that just would not have been possible otherwise? Without this context of history, it cannot be told if urgency and the momentum of change in terms of progress could be felt, thus marking the end of the intercontinental partnership. Innovation, as well as legacy competition to the space race. With the historic redefinition of ambition, when the world was touching the untouched, it went to the moon and came to know the cosmos. What started as a proud and aggressive competition between two superpowers has developed into a worldwide common endeavor that inspires us to this day. From then onwards, the technological shift in this regard was of utmost importance because everything evolved from communication to ordinary life. But as we move into the future, one question is left on our minds. Is the space race over, Or are we just beginning another chapter in space exploration? While the stakes are now higher than at any time for nations, companies, and even private individuals to quest for the ultimate frontier in space, there is also darkness beyond the stars, the darkness of the Cold War, which cast a long shadow over life on Earth, from fear and suspicion to every form of propaganda. Do old tensions revisit us in the garb of the new? How have fears born of the Cold War shaped our lives today? In what ways does propaganda shape and determine the thoughts of a whole generation?